Welcome back to the Elias Macko Show, 1121 right here on CJAD. Now, the U.S. military is setting up a blockade this morning of all Iranian ports and coastal areas on the Arabian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. U.S. President Donald Trump announced the move to pressure Iran after both sides were unable to strike a deal on Saturday. The face-to-face talks were the highest level of negotiations between the Iranian regime and the U.S. since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. In response to the U.S. blockade, Iran gave threats of their own, saying no port will be safe inside the blockade, and they are ready to fight if forced to do so. Let's head over now to Kyle Matthews. He's co-founder and executive director of the Montreal Institute for Global Security. He's on the line. Hey, Kyle, how you doing?
Good, Elias. How are you?
Doing okay. Now, I'll start off this interview this way. Are you losing any sleep over this? I mean, I understand if you're an airline executive in Europe, you're losing sleep over this with the soaring cost of jet fuel, and I can understand others losing sleep. You are executive director of the Montreal Institute for Global Security. Are you losing sleep over this?
Let's just say I'm sleeping uncomfortably. I think when we spoke last week, I said I didn't think that this 2-week truce was going to be sustainable, that it would come up against roadblocks. And that's exactly what we've seen. We've seen, one day of meetings in Pakistan, it's fallen apart. The people sent by the Americans are not exactly professional diplomats or peace negotiators. We also see the Iranian side pushing back. So this is also taking place. That's going to increasingly have an impact on energy prices. But also, we've got news that supposedly China is flying in arms and weapon supplies to Iran. So this is looking like it's not going to be a peace deal anytime soon, that the growing regional conflict between the U.S. and Iran is going to expand. And there are a lot of unknowns, not to quote Donald Rumsfeld, but there are a lot of unknowns in this situation. So where are we going to see in the next week or 2 weeks? I'm a bit concerned.
You said the word uncomfortable. I imagine top of the list is China shipping arms to Iran. What makes you so uncomfortable?
Well, listen. I've been saying from the start is that we've had an authoritarian group of states working together, and that's most notably Russia, Iran, and China together. They've been working to invade Ukraine for the last 4 years. They've somewhat been involved in targeting Israel. And so what we have is a situation where the United States, that's angered a lot of its allies and dismissed NATO, Canada, and others, and is now finding itself in a quagmire where it might be facing Russia, Iran, and China together. So that is what I feel uncomfortable about. That some of the mechanisms we're seeing put in place are of three very large countries, with Iran being the smallest, but Russia and China working to help Iran, setting shoulder-fired missiles to Iran, perhaps other weaponry and intelligence as well. That is not going to make the situation improve. It will actually have the potential to ignite into a bigger conflict.
So, I want to take you back in time here, Kyle. It's a couple of years ago, I actually moderated a panel for the big event that you put on at Concordia. It was still called MIGS, but it stood for something else back at the time, right?
Yeah.
And what struck me the day that I spent there at your conference and it was right before the U.S. election. And it was panelist conversation that I had with people when I asked them, who does China want to win the election, right? And I heard everyone was like, China wants Kamala Harris to win the election. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Why don't they want Trump to win the election? Like, well, because he's unpredictable and that kind of stuff. And, that sticks in my head to this day, right? What the people at your conference said. And now I see it now, like, as you mentioned, Iran, China, Russia banding together. And you still have a president that's very unpredictable. And here we are. I wonder how you unpack that, what we thought 2 years ago versus what we're seeing today.
So yeah, I think many people held that view. I've been hearing from a long time that the Chinese, even the first presidency, that they really wanted to see Trump stay in power because the way that he behaved, the way that he angered his allies, the way that he was flippant towards friendly nations worked in China's favor. But I don't think that China or other countries saw that Trump's second presidency would have been what we witnessed, where Trump always said he criticized the Democrats for getting involved in Libya, for getting involved in Ukraine. Trump portrayed all these. He said he was not going to intervene militarily anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and Trump 2.0 is actually it's the opposite. He's engaged in Venezuela. He's somewhat of a blockade against Cuba, but he's now in an armed conflict with Iran, and nobody quite saw that. So I think there is a bit of a flip of a switch. Trump and his colleagues they've been trying to be close friends with Russia to try to peel Russia away from China, because you talk to the Americans, China's the biggest threat to them. But yeah, there's been a shift, and I don't think anybody saw Trump's second presidency as being like what we're seeing now. Like what yesterday, this morning he's portraying himself with a photo of being Jesus, insulting the Pope yesterday. There seems to be an irrationality or a compulsion here that's not being held back like it was in the first presidency.
So I guess, I'm trying to go through all the things here. And of course, Donald Trump is facing midterms. There's internal pressure, right? You have the international pressure, but Donald Trump will face pressure ahead of the midterms on seemingly wrapping up a conflict like this. I don't think the American voter is too thrilled about it. So what do you say on the internal pressure that Donald Trump faces and how it will impact this conflict?
So I think there are two things. One is that Donald Trump and his colleagues are very aware that a rise in oil, global conflict, will have an impact on inflation and the cost of living, of which they promised they were going to control and bring down and make life more affordable for Americans. Mind you, the tariff policy kind of betrays that objective, but I think that is the case. We're looking at the stock market, looking at oil costs, and worrying how the average American will say, "You didn't make life cheaper for me." Mm-hmm. That is true. However, you cannot just get into an armed conflict in the Middle East with a country of 90 million people backed by Russia and China and just backpedal out of that within 1 week and everything goes back to normal. That's not how things work. So once these conflicts come into play, structurally they start to move on their own order, and I don't think that the Trump administration, I think you saw them in Pakistan, they think in one day they could show up and have a deal, but the past agreements to try to get a deal with Iran, it took years of technical expertise, diplomats working back and forth. So I don't think, even if he wants to pull out, I don't think he's going to be able to, and I think this is going to hang over. It's going to hang over the American midterm elections.
Let me ask you about the role of Israel in all of this. And I tell you, Kyle, over the last week, I've had people on this show, whether, panelists and that kind of stuff, where they've talked about Israel and President Benjamin Netanyahu, and they've said, you know what, it's Israel that's controlling all of this. And by the way, I've had people who say it in a positive way. They say that as a good thing, and then I've heard people who say it as a very negative thing on Israel's role. How do you see it?
So Israel is the partner of the U.S. in this war. Israel and the U.S. are close allies. However you feel about Netanyahu and his government, Israel doesn't control the United States. I think that's an anti-Semitic slur. Did Netanyahu tell Trump this would be an easy cakewalk? Perhaps. But you have to look back here, is that the history of Iran and the U.S. goes back centuries. We had the Ayatollah that actually had put out a hit to kill Trump before he was on his second presidency. Mm-hmm. You've had Iranian terror attacks against American troops in Lebanon in the 80s. So this is not new. And Iran also, supported all these groups to attack American soldiers in the second Iraq War. So that might be a very simple thing to say, but the U.S. and Iran have been kind of neck and neck and enemies for some time. So mm-hmm. Israel is a part of this. It's their allyship. But to say that someone is pulling the strings, I think is deeply untruthful and naive in some way.
47 years of history on that end. Kyle, do have to leave it there. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
That's Kyle Matthews, Executive Director of the Montreal Institute for Global Security.
The newest tracks. Let's go. New music. And the next big thing.
Always on the new music first.
Your first place to hear it all.
'Cause you gon' like it, love it, wanna play it twice. Playing now.
iHeart New Music. Your digital station for brand new drops, fresh finds, and tomorrow's bangers.
I think we need something new.
Discover iHeart New Music. Always fresh, always first. Stream now on the free iHeartRadio app.